Hi, everybody, and welcome. We're here in the second learning block for lesson 11. This is one of the hardest ones for me to do because I am a huge advocate of storytelling. And so I'm going to try taking a deep breath to get this through all the content as quickly as I can, keeping it around our 8 to 8.5 minute mark that we aim for in these. The biggest thing I want to get across in this is how powerful storytelling is. When we talk about data, we oftentimes get absorbed in the data and we forget about the storytelling pieces of it. But storytelling is super, super, super important. As a member of line staff, if you're a family advocate, if you're a teacher, if you're a social worker, anybody else, you're telling stories in your job in a lot of different ways. You're communicating ideas because storytelling is natural. It's what we do. It's a human thing. Humans are storytellers. The oral tradition, actually standing up and giving a story spoken in front of a room, is a mix of improvisation and memory. You have set things that you've remembered, communications you're trying to get across, but you're improvising for the person in front of you or the group of people in front of you so that you have that audience involved. Written storytelling is pretty new in the history of humanity. I've heard it said that if you took a clock and you said, okay, well, if I'm taking the 24 hours in a day and you look at all of human history, when did we start writing? And we started writing at like 15 minutes before midnight at the end of the day. So I don't know if that's true. I've never done the math, but it's a cool story to think about how new the written word is compared to the spoken word. So when we're thinking about data and we're talking about how to communicate it to people, we want to remember that that spoken delivery of the story is a powerful one. People remember stories. Good stories have power. Storytelling with data helps engage a wide audience of people who might otherwise disengage. Telling stories with data is also a lot more fun. Honestly, it's way more fun. And one of the things that we tried to do in having real world examples for so many of the lessons that you're engaging in is to have those stories there for you. So you're not just hearing me say, data transparency is important, data quality is important. You're hearing someone tell you why data quality mattered for them in improving the lives of the children and families in their program. And that's the kind of thing that we really wanted to get across, because you're going to remember those stories more than you're going to remember me talking about ideas. There's some basic things you want to think about when you're telling a story for the purpose of teaching. Now, a lot of you, this may be familiar, and you may do this, you may not have thought about it in this particular bullet point set, but you're probably doing this all the time. If you're a teacher in the classroom, you're telling stories way more often than I'm telling stories, and you're probably thinking, yeah, I know how to tell stories. But other people may or may not, and even if you're a teacher, you're probably not thinking about how do I tell stories to parents with data in terms of engaging them with their child's development. So bear with me while I give some basics here. The takeaway in storytelling is the thing that you really want them to take away from the story. And there's a lot of examples of this. The takeaway in a learning block like this one for me is I want you to take away from this the power of storytelling to engage communities. That's what I want. Ultimately, everything else I say is oriented towards that. You're setting the tone. Sometimes you set a bright tone from the beginning. I tend to start every one of these with a bright tone, but one of the things about this is sometimes you want to emphasize that there was great struggle and we overcame it. So you kind of have this down and then upswing at the end. You want to engage with the person. You want to be aware of who you are talking to. Now, sometimes it's one person. It might be a conference with a parent. It also could be a conference with the whole family. So it's a group of people. You might be in front of a room full of families. So again, your audience is going to be different. How do you engage with them? Keep it simple. Keep the story straightforward. Keep it simple. Focus on the human side of it, because the human side is what they're going to remember and connect with the most, because it's just naturally how we do it. When we think about it, story elements are one piece of this puzzle. It's a bit of information you can use in your stories. Sometimes you might use it all the time. Other times you're going to use it much more rarely, but they're very useful pieces that you can have. If you are working with a family, if you're a family advocate or a family counselor, and you're saying, I am going to be engaging with a whole group of families, there are going to be some things that your organization is trying to communicate collectively that are going to get across certain ideas, things you're focusing on because you're trying to build up the families in these different areas. But That might be universal. You might talk to every family about these things. But you're also going to have the times where there's something specific, there's something unusual going on with a family, and you need to really be able to engage with them effectively. It might be that they have a child who has been diagnosed with a pretty significant developmental delay, one that may be with them for their whole educational experience and for the rest of their lives. And you're going to have to engage that parent with an idea that they may not want to address. Culturally, such things may not be spoken about, but also, how does that parent become an advocate for their child once they're outside of a Head Start? You have to prepare them for those kind of things. You're going to use it rarely, but you are going to use it. Anecdotes are real people, real examples of how the story element manifests with real people. It can be a personal experience, but it can also be the experience of another real person. The pair of an element to an anecdote is powerful, but it takes some practice to really engage it in a way that lets you communicate most effectively. This is especially true around data. A lot of times we have this idea that, oh, the data speaks for itself, but it doesn't. It doesn't register. It doesn't land that way. And they've studied a lot of audience reactions to stories with data, and people remember the story. They don't remember the data. So with an element anecdote pair, tying the two together gives you that personal dimension to the point you're trying to get across. And the evidence helps you to land that key takeaway point, but it's not the center of the story. The goal is communicate the ideas and to have them remembered. So the key thing in trying to convince a parent that it's important to promote good attendance isn't 85% attendance is associated with a 3% increase in the likelihood that a child is going to be kindergarten ready. That's boring for me to just say. It's not going to land with a parent. You have to have the story. You have to have the idea that goes on to support that idea. So stories are huge, but it takes a little while to get used to it. Stories, while they're a natural part of humanity, you want to practice to be as effective a storyteller as you can. Storytelling gets easier the more that you do it. Anyone can learn to tell stories. We all have our voice. You wouldn't know it from these videos, but I was a terrified youngster when it came to talking in public, speaking and engaging. I was terrified of these kinds of things, and I just didn't do it. I was a quiet little mousy kid off in the corner. And it wasn't until I got into high school drama, literally in 10th grade, that I found my voice as somebody who could stand up in front of a room full of people and really talk and engage. And I found that by not really saying anything about me, but telling other people's stories through drama in theater. And I will say to this day, that was one of the most valuable experiences I have because it pulled me out of my shell. Anybody can do that in their own voice. Your voice is probably very different than mine. My voice is different from other people who work in my organization, who work for the National Head Start Association, but we can all do it. And it's going to be our own way of doing it. And honestly, that's great because if we all told stories the same way, it would be really, really boring. So engaging everyone together through practice, make it fun. Don't just tell stories with data. Tell inspiring stories, motivating stories. Take 3 minutes at the start of a meeting to have the inspiring story of the day. Whatever works for you and your organization, make it comfortable and fun to learn to tell stories. What's the anecdote element pair that gets the point across? Can you do it in 3 minutes? Can you do it in 5 minutes? There's a lot of different ways you can do it, but always remember about the people. Data efforts are all about people. So find that way to connect those pieces together and just get used to letting people know how data is related to them and how it brings all these different things together, and communicate it clearly in a way that they're going to remember because they remember the story, even if they never remember the data. But the data helped to bring the point home.